Hey, what's up guys? Matt here coming to you from Laidlaw's Harley-Davidson. So today Nick and I are going to take out the new Nightster Special. So this is a different version than the Nightster that we saw introduced in the 22 model year. Harley-Davidson gave it a little bit more electronics, a couple more things like cruise control on this bike, changed the style of the bike a little bit. You're looking at about $1,500 more. This is about $15,000 price range on the Nightster Special. This is the fourth bike in Harley-Davidson's Rev Max platform and the third bike in Harley-Davidson's new Sportster family. So we saw the Sportster S, then the Nightster, now we have the Nightster Special. This is the first time I'm going to be riding the Nightster Special along with Nick. I've ridden the regular Nightster. I assume they're going to be pretty close, and the suspension and the motor is all pretty much the same. You got a couple things that are different on the Special that we're going to be going to in detail. Nick, what are you going to be looking for on this new Rev Max Sportster?
I think for me, what I'm going to be really kind of focusing on is the electronics overall and just, how it impacts, the riding experience. This bike does have the 6-axis IMU, so the ABS is lean sensitive, the traction control is more advanced. The gauge cluster is a full TFT, just like the Sportster S, which I think is a nice upgrade. So I think that the riding experience, like Matt said, is going to be pretty similar, but I think that between the electronics and the instrumentation and the slightly different ergonomics, I think the riser setup is a little bit different. I think I'm going to enjoy it a fair bit more. I like the aesthetics of the bike a lot more. I like the classic tank design. I'm a big fan of the more retro tank graphics that are set up here. The previous tank is nice, or the Nightster tank is nice, but I just think that this is a more classic look. It kind of mirrors the more of the Sportster vibe to begin with. And then I'm a huge fan of these wheels. Both, I think the design is really, really nice. Matt said it's kind of like a combination of like the Prodigy and the Fugitive. And I like the finish a lot too. It matches the engine really, really nicely. I think it just gives a much more sophisticated look to the bike. So I'm excited to try out the electronics, but I honestly just really like the way the bike looks too. And I enjoyed riding the Nightster, and I think I'm going to enjoy riding this. So I'm excited to take them out again.
So I don't know a ton of people that have a bunch of experience on the Rev Max motor, but of the people I know that ride the Rev Max, I think Nick probably has the most experience of anybody I know on the Rev Max motor. He owns a Pan America. He bought one when they first came out. He's got over 10,000 miles on his now. Be looking for the video he's going to be doing here pretty soon on his first 10,000 miles and his experience with the Rev Max. This is the 975T version. The Pan America is the 1250 version. So this is the Rev Max 975T, T for torque, so it's tuned a little bit different than the Pan America is. The Pan America is all about that top end touring, 150 peak horsepower. This bike, it's a smaller displacement, it's a 975. It puts out 70 foot-pounds of torque and 90 horsepower. Like I said, smaller displacement. It's tuned more for that low end torque. The Sportster is a little bit more of like a around town, zipping around, stoplight to stoplight bike. So I'd be curious to hear Nick's take on it. I know he really likes the Rev Max motor. He's definitely a go fast performance type of a rider where he prioritizes the speed and everything.
Obviously, I'm a big fan of the new engine. In comparison to the old Evo motor, especially, it's just a massive leap up in performance. The Evo is a great motor. It's got great character, but you're still going to get a V-twin character with this bike, but you're going to get double the amount of horsepower, and it's a lighter motor. In my own personal experience, it's got power all throughout the rev range because of the variable valve timing. It comes on strong, low in the RPM range, and it pulls just forever. And it's not a particularly buzzy engine. You would think that because it's a stressed member of the chassis that you'd end up with a lot of vibrations, but it's no buzzier than the Softails I've ridden. So Harley did a great job with the counterbalancer. I know actually on this motor in particular, the counterbalancer is like a pretty advanced thing that was designed by like a computer, basically, in fluid dynamics or some shit, big words I don't understand, but it translates to a really smooth operating motor, and there's just not a lot of bad things to say about it. It's got great character, pulls really, really hard, super lightweight, rev happy, but also torquey, especially in the T configurations. But honestly, with them being variable valve timing, you kind of just get the best of both worlds. They've got a lot of torque, but they They also pull really hard all the way to redline. So I don't have enough good things to honestly say. The only thing I wish is that they stuck a 1250T into a bike that looked like this, that had a very traditional cruiser aesthetic, but had the big motor. It doesn't necessarily need to be the S motor like what's in the Pan Am. It could be the T motor like what's in the Sportster S. But they could also, do a full-blown crazy cruiser and stick the S motor in there and give it 150 horsepower. But overall, mine's been really, really solid. It's hard to talk about something that is overall just really, really good because you just sound like you're just kind of firing a bunch of praise at it. But I think that even if you don't watch just our review, if you watch every review of the Pan Am, everyone just gushes over that motor. It's always featured as one of the highlights in pretty much every review I've seen of the bike, and it translates to the Sportster S, it translates to the Nightster, and it translates to the Nightster S as well. It's a gem.
So we've talked about this before, but I think it's worth mentioning again. The Nightster is pretty much the bike that Harley-Davidson has introduced to replace the traditional Iron 883. For years, we've sold a bunch of the Iron 883s. It's been a great bike over the years for a lot of reasons. A great price point. It's a great bike that a lot of people just get as an introductory bike into the Harley-Davidson world. So this is a bike that's going to be replacing that. The Nightster comes in at $13,500. Like I said, the Nightster Special is $14,999. So you're talking about a considerably higher price point now. And so yes, we have a higher price point, but the bike is just far more advanced in every single way. Way more power, better suspension, better electronics, the rider aids, the cruise control, the traction control, the ABS, everything is just better. It's just a better, higher performing motorcycle. So you pay for what you get in a sense. There's still people that I think will make the argument, and as I've talked to people on the floor, because we still have some of the Iron 883s on the floor, I think it's always an argument of traditional Harley-Davidson and the look, the aesthetics of everything as well. A lot of people still are stuck in that, traditional Harley world, which I value a lot as well. I think that the look of a Harley-Davidson is very, very important. And so it's a little bit of a trade-off, I would say, between giving up some of the old traditional air-cooled pushrod motor look in lieu of a water-cooled, a little bit more of a modern-looking bike. And so if you can get over that trade-off, then you have a better motorcycle with the new RevMax Sportster platform. There comes a time where you have to move forward, you have to progress, you have to stay up with the times and what people expect out of a motorcycle. So I feel like we have to eventually make that trade-off, and I think we've put it off long enough. So we're gonna take them out and we're gonna check it out and give you guys our thoughts on them. Alright guys, so I want to take just a minute and show off the 4 available color options on the Nightster Special in the 23 model year. So first off, you got Vivid Black, which is the color that we're featuring in the main video here. You've also got Denim Black, which I think is a really good color option just because the Iron 883 for the longest time, Denim Black was like the bread and butter of the 883. At our shop, we were actually really surprised to see the omission of Denim Black on the regular Nightster when it was first launched. So it's good to see that color as an available option on the Nightster Special. You've also got the bright billiard blue on here, and notice you don't change the color of the front and rear fender and the side cover there. You just have the tank is the only thing that really is affected by the different color options. And then the 4th and final color is the industrial yellow. The industrial yellow is another new color in this model year, and so there's your 4 colors. A couple other things I want to point out just so they don't get missed. You do have a passenger setup on the Nightster Special when compared to the regular Nightster, in which you just have a solo seat on here. So you've got the passenger pillion, you've got the passenger pegs on here as well, and then you can see here the 4-inch TFT screen, which is much like what we saw on the Sportster S. Definitely a really nice gauge there. And then other than that, you've got pretty much just finishes that are different and wheel design. So the wheel design is definitely different, which I really like the different wheel design. It kind of gives it that spoke look a little bit, even though it's definitely not spokes. So it still has a little bit of that spoke appeal, which I think is cool because the original Nightster that came out back in 2007 had spokes on it. You've also got a metal emblem on the side of the tank. The regular Nightster is painted on there, so a little bit of a difference there. And then of course like the engine trim and like your main primary case and everything. It's all like this silverish color that kind of mimics like a raw metal color, which I think is a little bit more of an authentic metal color. Alright, so just got off the Nightster and the Nightster Special. So, you know, every time I ride these bikes, I'm like, wow, like these are fun bikes. Harley did a good job. And they are different. It's not like your Softail with the Milwaukee 8 air-cooled motor. It's definitely a different experience. This motor, even more so than even the Pan America and the 1250, the Sportster S, you got to rev them up a little bit. You know, they like to come alive around that 7,000 RPM, so you really got to rev them out a little bit. You know, with that lower displacement, they're made to just gain their horsepower in the high rev ranges, right? So super agile. I mean, we're talking about a sub 500 pound bike here. I think these are what, Nick, like 480 pounds. A lot lighter. We caught a bunch of traffic. I'm not sure what happened. There was like an accident on the freeway or something like that. Like, it's just crazy traffic around town right now, but going in and out of traffic, cutting through the lanes, splitting lanes, this is just a great bike. And even if you got to take it out on the freeway, still a good bike out on the freeway. I mean, you've got a little over 3 inches of travel in the rear, you got 4.5 inches in the front. You can set the preload in the rear. The front is the Showa dual bending valve in the front suspension. So the suspension is a lot better than any of the air-cooled Evo Sportsters we've seen in the past. And that was something I always talk to people about when they were buying like an Iron 883 or any of the 1200 Sportsters with the air-cooled Evo platform. You really are kind of limited by the comfort out on the freeway. And I know people are gonna battle me on this, but the fact of the matter is, Sportsters of old were just not that great on the freeway. These are a lot better. They're still not as good as like your Softails and your touring chassis bikes, of course. Me personally, if I were to buy one of these bikes, maybe I was a little bit younger, maybe I didn't do as much touring, maybe I lived in city area or something like that where I was having to go, you know, around town a lot, maybe battle traffic, whatever it may be. I'd like to say I would do the Special. I personally like the look of the Special a little bit better. I agree with Nick in that the wheels with the gray finishes I think look a little bit better. It gives it a little bit more of a contrast than just having a completely black canvas on the bike. And I like the bigger instrumentation, 4-inch TFT screen on the Special a little bit more than that combination analog LCD screen that we have on the regular Nightster. You do have the extra electronics on the Special with the GPS compatible and like all the media compatibility with that screen on there. It all piggybacks off your cell phone, so you got to get the app. You got to use the app to use the navigation and everything like that. A little bit limiting when you compare it to like a touring chassis infotainment system. Let's get Nick's thoughts real quick here though.
You know, it's surprisingly quick. You know, it doesn't have the torque down low of like a Milwaukee 8, of course, but it's like a very different animal. You know, I'd say it definitely has more torque than the 883 for sure, and it's got way more horsepower. One of the things I was just thinking about the whole ride is like I really wish there was like a grippier material on the seat, because every time I was giving it a little bit of a pull to go past Matt to get a nice shot of the bike going past the camera, like I was having to fixate on not sliding off the rear. So, you know, maybe some sort of like step up or seat or something like that holds you in a little bit better would be nice. The new display that's on the Special, it gives you definitely a more premium feel sitting from the saddle. I really appreciated the hand controls. So the regular Nightster doesn't have the same hand controls as the Pan Am, and I'm pretty used to the Pan Am controls, and I think that you've got a lot of functionality in the hand controls that if you don't have the 6-axis IMU, if you don't have the nice upgraded display, there's not a lot of utility for those hand controls. So I get why they didn't include them on the regular Nightster, but on the Nightster S, because you have that connectivity, because you have the 6-axis IMU, it's nice to have those hand controls. They offer a lot of functionality. The cruise control is really, really nice. I was surprised by the suspension. You know, Matt mentioned this is a big step up from the previous generation Sportster, and you know, we're riding around on roads that just got pummeled by rain, so we've got potholes everywhere, and it's not the same as, you know, 7 inches of suspension travel on the Pan Am, but it's a lot. So it's, you know, light years better than what the old Sportster was. So I got off of it just really thinking like, man, I could definitely see myself actually like owning something like this. For someone who wants to stay in that kind of $15,000 price point, maybe doesn't do the kind of longer trips that we do, who, you know, probably wouldn't necessarily even miss the extra power of the 1250. The 975 it's strong, it's torquey, it's got a lot of horsepower, it's quick, it's lightweight. Moving it around just for photos, the weight doesn't really explain how light the bike actually feels, because in addition to the bike only being in the 400s, center of gravity is really low. Honestly, for the Pan Am, I think in large part the center of gravity of the bike needed to be kept low, and of this powertrain, because if you're in the dirt, you want a low center of gravity. But this bike feels even lighter than that because you've got the fuel tank below the chassis, just like on a V-Rod almost. So that air box, while it's still metal and it's still super nice looking like a gas tank on a Sportster, it doesn't actually house any gas. So it's underneath the seat, which keeps the center of gravity even lower. So moving it around, it's almost like terrifyingly light. Like you forget that it's a 480 pound bike. So no, chassis is super nimble. It feels like a sport bike, honestly. The way that it handles, because the engine's hard mounted and there's no perimeter frame, there's no rubber mounted engine, the bike feels like a single unit, and it behaves like a single unit. I say one thing I will comment on is, I know that everyone loves Brembos and always talks about Brembos, and this bike does have Brembos, and it even has a Brembo master cylinder. I'm actually not the biggest fan of Brembo master cylinders. I ran one on my track bike, and it does a great job, but the actual feel, I feel like it's a little squishy on initial bite. I actually like the brake feel of like the Softail master cylinder a little bit better, but that's kind of nitpicking, and it's something you get used to. And I've got Brembo master cylinders on every single one of my bikes, so it's not like a deal breaker for me or anything.
When these bikes first started coming out, we started comparing them immediately around other makes and manufacturers' competing model. And when you do that, you start analyzing, the price and the cost of everything, and kind of the value you get out of these bikes. And one of the things that we kept going back to is, are there bikes that are arguably in this class that are less money? And the answer is yes. But then if you start dissecting things like the fit and finish that Harley-Davidson is so well known for, that's where these bikes far outshine some of the competitors in this lower price point cruiser class, we'll call it. And then some of the tech too. If you really start, diving into, the tech, like the traction control and the ABS, and if you're looking at the Special, you've got things like cruise control, and you've got the IMU that has the cornering enhanced traction control, drag torque slip control, things like that. That's where some of the competitors in the lower price point cruiser market, they don't match up evenly. And if you look at the power as well, there's some bikes in this class that have a little bit more power, but a lot of them at lower price points don't have as much power. And the bikes that are, let's say we'll call it the $11,000 to $15,000 price range, that put out more power than these bikes, a lot of times they're upright naked sport bikes. They're not even cruisers, and the fit and finish just isn't anywhere near what most people want out of a cruiser motorcycle. And so yes, these bikes are more money than the air-cooled Evo Sportsters like the Iron 883. They've gone up, but you also have to look at what you get above and beyond those older bikes.
Matt was talking a little bit too about fit and finish, you just mentioned, and that's something that actually stuck out to me on the Nightster S. I was paying attention to certain things that they had done. The fit and finish on the hand controls, I think, is a fair bit better than the Nightster even, actually, which is funny because they're such similar bikes. There's also things that are metal on the Nightster S that are plastic, like the housing for the gauge. Not only is the gauge different, but the triple tree clamp and housing, the way that's integrated on the Nightster S, is actually all metal, which is really nice to see, because that's something that I've looked at a lot of cruisers that would be considered competitors to this in that kind of $11,000 to $15,000 price point range, and none of the housings for them are nearly as nice as what's on the Nightster S. Another thing too is just how well something is implemented. Sometimes you'll look at something and it'll check the box. It'll be like, oh, they both have 4.3 inch screens. But then when you look at the size of the bezel on the Nightster S, that's something that really struck me, is that it doesn't even look like there's a screen in there. It's like a single housing. The screen is very close to the edge, which is something that tech companies focus on, but automotive manufacturers tend to be way behind the times on. They tend to have these massive bezels, because you've got to engineer everything to automotive standards. You can push the limits on your cell phone because it doesn't have to be rated to sit in the sunlight for 6 hours straight when you're at work, with might happen with your Nightster. So it was really cool to see really thin bezels on the display, really nice contrast on the display, really deep blacks on the display. It just gives it a really premium look. So for $1,500 difference between these two, between the passenger setup, between cruise control, between the 6-axis IMU, so you've got the more advanced electronics, and that display, for me, it's almost it's not even a question mark. It's unless there's something about the Nightster that you really prefer. You know, maybe you really just like the wheel color, I don't know, but then you could just powder coat the wheels and still have everything else. I'm just staring at the Nightster S, thinking to myself that it's kind of the more obvious choice, which is easy to say. You know, $1,500 is $1,500. That may or may not break the deal for you, but for me, I think that there's a lot of nice value to the S. It's definitely the direction I would lean on if I was going between these two bikes.
So all in all, guys, at the very end of these videos, I like to give my recommendation on who I would recommend this bike for. And I think a lot of the people that I recommend, like the old Sportsters too, I would recommend this bike too as well. But you are getting quite a bit different animal than you got with the air-cooled Evo motor. But it is still the lower end of the price point in Harley-Davidson's lineup. However, you are looking at about $4,000 more now to get into the Special. You know, the Sportsters of old, like the Irons, when they kind of came to an end there, they were about a $10,000, $11,000 motorcycle. And now on the Nightster, you're looking at $13,500. So you're looking anywhere, you know, $3,000 or $4,000 more to get into the new lowest end Sportster in the Harley-Davidson's lineup, which is considerably more. You know, it's about $60 a month more. And you're looking at, like, from a payment standpoint, $60 to $80 more. But again, I would really recommend these bikes to the guys that want to do a lot of around town stuff. These are more capable out on the freeway. This is a bike that people are going to keep for longer, for sure. And that's actually the point that I want to make the most, is when you compare these bikes to like the Iron 883, the Iron 883, you really hit a ceiling on where you could take that bike, you know, pretty quickly. And if you were progressing your ability level and your comfort level out on the road, if you were a newer rider, you hit a ceiling on the Iron 883 where you felt like you just didn't have enough bike. You didn't have enough power, you didn't have enough comfort. And so the ceiling on this new Nightster and Nightster Special is just a lot higher, where you're not going to feel like, okay, I need to upgrade after 6 months. This is a bike that you can own for a long time. And even if you're a more skilled, advanced rider, if it's the right tool for the job you're trying to do, it makes a lot of sense, even at a high ability level. Where I couldn't really say that about like an Iron 883. I felt like if you were at like a really high skill level and you wanted a bike to hit the canyons and wanted it to perform really well in terms of braking and power coming in and out of turns and the agility of the bike, I wouldn't really even recommend it for that type of rider. Whereas the new Nightster and Nightster Special, I would recommend it to an advanced rider that wanted to take it up the canyons, rip it around, take it for a local trip. You know, you don't have that much range. You only got about 3 gallons of fuel in these things. So not a long distance bike, which I think most people know that. I don't got to say that. It's just a bike that, as a newer rider, if you wanted to get into a lower price point Harley-Davidson and you're not going to be doing on like long overnight touring stuff, it's a bike that you can have and enjoy longer, and you can grow your skill a little bit with the bike without feeling like you had to trade it in right away. And so that's a point that I want to bring up, because I think that's important. That's something that we've seen a lot with the older style air-cooled Evo motors. Yes, you do take a little bit of a step back from what most people look for in a traditional sounding and feeling Harley-Davidson. Although I think a lot of the newer generation, a lot of newer riders getting into Harley-Davidson don't prioritize that as much as maybe some of the baby boomers and the Gen Xers do. And so a lot of it is just preference and character of motor. However, I will say the Rev Max, for what it is, you know, has high peaky horsepower. It's got pretty good character. Like, you put a pipe on these things and they sound pretty beastie. So, you know, you can make these things sound really good with a pipe on them. Definitely a good welcome addition to the Harley-Davidson family. But I appreciate you guys watching. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I always try to answer everybody. And if you're looking for a Harley-Davidson in Southern California, make sure you check us out here at Laidlaw's Harley-Davidson. And we'll see you on the next video, guys. Thanks for watching. Later.